Banished by the galaxy, humanity declares war and builds a mighty empire. The massive crystalline dome of the Galactic Council chamber pulsed with blue-white light, illuminating the faces of over 200 alien species. Ambassador Thomas Reed stood alone on the central platform, a solitary human surrounded by a sea of alien delegates. His face remained stoic despite the wave of whispers rippling through the chamber. Humanity stands accused of technological heresy, genetic manipulation beyond authorized parameters, and willful disregard of council directives, announced High Arbiter Velixis, a 12-foot-tall being with iridescent scales and 4 arms. For 50 cycles we have observed your species with growing concern. Reed's voice carried clearly through the chamber. We modified our genome to survive on worlds you deemed uninhabitable. We developed technologies you restricted because we had no choice. Earth is dying. We needed solutions. The council chamber erupted in hisses and electronic chatters of disapproval. Your explanations are irrelevant, Velixis continued, raising all 4 arms for silence. The evidence is overwhelming. The council has reached its verdict. A holographic display materialized above the chamber floor, showing a unanimous decision. Reed's heart sank. By unanimous decree, humanity is hereby severed from the Galactic Commonwealth. All trade routes to Sol system are terminated. All diplomatic ties dissolved. Any human vessel attempting to cross beyond the Kuiper Belt will be considered hostile and destroyed. You are confined to your solar system indefinitely. Reed's fingers curled into fists at his sides. You realize what this means for Earth? For our colonies? Your problems are no longer the Council's concern, said Velixis, eyes narrowing to slits. The quarantine begins immediately. As armed guards approached to escort him out, Reed's voice echoed through the chamber one final time. Remember this day. You've made an enemy of the one species you should have feared. The chamber fell silent as the human was removed. On the edge of the assembly, a delegate from the ancient Morrigan collective leaned toward a companion and whispered, "They've made a terrible mistake. Humans don't accept defeat. They evolve." The return journey to Earth was the longest 16 days of Thomas Reed's life. His diplomatic vessel, once treated with respect at every spaceport, was now escorted by 4 Council warships that made no effort to hide their weapons locked on his hull. "Ambassador, we're approaching the Kuiper checkpoint," his pilot announced. "Council ships are signaling for us to continue alone from here." Reed nodded, watching through the view screen as the escort vessels peeled away. "They're making their point clear. The cage door is closing behind us." Earth appeared as a blue jewel against the blackness of space, still beautiful despite its environmental wounds. As they descended through the atmosphere, Reed prepared himself for the hardest briefing of his career. The emergency session of the United Nations General Assembly was packed beyond capacity. Representatives from every nation sat in stunned silence as Reed finished explaining the Council's verdict. "So that's it?" asked President Eleanor Morgan, her voice echoing in the chamber. "After 20 years of cooperation, technology exchange, and following their rules, they've simply cut us off?" "Worse than cut off," Reed clarified. "They've imprisoned us within our own solar system. The Council fleet is already establishing a blockade. Any attempt to send ships beyond Pluto's orbit will be considered an act of aggression." The Chinese delegate stood. "What of our colonies on Proxima Centauri B? There are 16,000 people there." "Abandoned," Reed said flatly. "The Council informed me they've been given the choice to integrate with local governance or be relocated. They didn't elaborate on what that meant." The chamber erupted in outrage. President Morgan banged her gavel repeatedly until order was restored. "What exactly triggered this decision?" asked the Russian representative. "We've always known our genetic modification programs pushed boundaries, but nothing warranted this response." Reed activated a holographic display showing technical specifications. "Our latest terraforming techniques on Mars. The Council classifies the particulate recombination approach we developed as prohibited technology. They claim it could destabilize planetary cores if misused." "That's absurd," said Dr. Khatri, the leading scientific advisor. "Our methods are perfectly stable. We've run thousands of simulations." "The Council isn't interested in our data," Reed replied. "They've been looking for an excuse. Humanity has been advancing too quickly for their comfort. We've accomplished in decades what took other species centuries." Silence fell over the assembly as the implications sank in. Earth was already struggling with resource depletion, climate instability, and overpopulation. The colonies and extraterrestrial trade had been their lifeline. President Morgan finally spoke, her voice steady. "How long do we have before the resource shortages become critical?" 6 months for certain rare elements essential to our technology, the economic advisor responded. "Perhaps a year before food distribution systems are significantly impacted. 2 years before the situation becomes untenable." Morgan nodded slowly, then squared her shoulders. "Then we have no choice. Ambassador Reed, I'm appointing you as director of a new initiative. You know their weaknesses, their systems, their vulnerabilities." "Madam President, are you suggesting we fight the entire Galactic Council?" asked the Brazilian representative. "Their technology is centuries beyond ours." "No," Morgan replied. "Not yet. I'm suggesting we survive, adapt, and remember." She turned to face the assembly. "History has shown that isolating and cornering humans never ends well for those who attempt it. We are at our most creative, our most determined, and our most dangerous when we have nothing to lose." She pressed a button, and the screens around the chamber displayed a simple phrase: Project Phoenix. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are not going to merely survive this banishment. We are going to use it. While they watch our borders, we will rebuild. While they expect us to wither, we will transform. And when we are ready, we will remind the galaxy why humanity should never be underestimated." The assembly rose to their feet, a unified purpose replacing the earlier despair. Outside the United Nations, millions watched on screens as President Morgan addressed the world. Citizens of Earth heard only portions of the truth: that alien relations had been temporarily suspended due to diplomatic differences, that adjustments would be needed, that humanity would overcome this challenge as it had overcome others. What they didn't hear was the declaration made in that closed session, the words that would shape humanity's future among the stars. "We will not be caged, we will not be forgotten, and we will not forgive." In the following weeks, the solar system transformed. Council ships formed a perimeter beyond Pluto, their sensors constantly scanning for any attempt to breach the quarantine. Communication with the outside galaxy was severed, leaving humanity isolated for the first time since first contact 20 years earlier. On Mars, the massive terraforming complexes were repurposed. What had once created atmosphere now built weapons. What had once moved water now tested propulsion systems. Earth's orbital shipyards, once producing civilian vessels, now assembled components for something larger. 6 months after the banishment, in a hardened facility beneath the lunar surface, Reed stood before a gathering of Earth's finest scientific and military minds. "We've analyzed everything we know about Council technology," he said. "Walking among holographic displays of alien ships and weapons. They're advanced but predictable. They haven't fought a real war in 2,000 years. Their defense systems are designed to intimidate, not innovate." General Diana Wells, formerly of NATO Special Forces, studied the schematics. "Their blockade formation has gaps. Small, but they exist." "Exactly," Reed nodded. "They don't expect us to try anything so soon. They believe we're struggling just to maintain our civilization." Dr. Marcus Garrett, the physicist whose work had contributed to the banishment, stepped forward. "The quantum membrane technology we've been developing in secret, it's ready for testing." "And the prototype vessel?" asked Reed. "The Ghostwalker is complete," General Wells confirmed. "Small, fast, and if Dr. Garrett's theories are correct, invisible to Council sensors." Reed looked around the room at the determined faces. "Then we begin. Not with an attack, we're not ready for that. But information is what we need most. Star charts, communication protocols, fleet deployments, technology we don't yet possess." He brought up a map of nearby star systems. "The Council thinks they've contained us. They expect us to turn inward, perhaps even destroy, or they won't know what hit them," General Wells finished. In orbit around Jupiter, hidden within the radiation belts that scrambled most sensors, the Ghostwalker prepared for its maiden voyage. Captain Amara Jackson reviewed the mission parameters one final time. Slip past the blockade, proceed to the Epsilon Eridani system, gather intelligence, and return without detection, she summarized. Simple enough. Her small crew of 5, the best Earth had to offer, performed final checks. The ship hummed with power as Dr. Garrett's experimental drive spun up, enveloping the vessel in a field that would, theoretically, render them undetectable. Project Fiend. Banished by the galaxy, humanity declares war and builds a mighty empire, Captain. Amara Jackson pressed her face against the viewport of the Ghost Walker as they approached the massive trading station orbiting Epsilon Eridani. 5 years after humanity's banishment, this was her 7th covert mission beyond Council borders. The sprawling space station looked like a glittering wheel with dozens of alien vessels docked along its spokes. "Quantum membrane stable," reported Lieutenant Patel from the science station. "We're still invisible to their sensors." "Position us near Docking Bay 12, Jackson ordered. That's where the data transmission hub is located according to our intel. The Ghost Walker slipped silently between 2 massive cargo haulers, its revolutionary drive bending light and other forms of detection around the hull. What had started as a desperate theory in Dr. Garrett's lab had become humanity's greatest advantage: true invisibility. "I'm picking up a Council military transmission," said Communications Officer Rivera, his fingers dancing across the holographic interface. "Translating now." The alien language filtered through the ship's computers, converting to English. "Increase patrols in the Procyon sector. Human activity suspected. Repeat, increase security protocols. The quarantined species may have breached containment." Jackson exchanged glances with her crew. "They're getting suspicious. We need to finish this operation quickly." She activated her secure communicator, linking to the small infiltration team that had already boarded the station disguised as maintenance drones. "Extraction team status?" "Nearly complete, Captain," came the whispered reply. "We've accessed the primary database, downloading star charts, patrol schedules, and wait, we've found something big. Technical specifications for the new Council warships, and something called the Archimedes Protocol." Jackson frowned. "What is it?" "Unknown. Heavily encrypted, but it's labeled as Priority Alpha for all Council races." "Copy everything," Jackson ordered. 5 more minutes, then withdraw." As the Ghost Walker maintained position, a Council security vessel passed within 100 meters, its scanning beams sweeping through the space they occupied. Everyone on the bridge held their breath, but the quantum membrane held. "Team is returning to extraction point," announced Rivera. "Data package secured," Jackson nodded. "Take us out, Lieutenant. Nice and slow until we're clear, then full burn for the Sol jump point." As the Ghost Walker slipped away from the trading station, none of the aliens going about their business realized they had just handed humanity the keys to the Council's destruction. Deep beneath the surface of Mars, the command center of Project Phoenix hummed with activity. What had begun as a desperate response to banishment had evolved into a highly organized operation spanning the entire solar system. Dr. Marcus Garrett stood before a 3-dimensional hologram, examining the complex equations that described his latest breakthrough. At 42, he had aged considerably in the 5 years since banishment. Dark circles rimmed his eyes, and premature gray streaked his once black hair, the cost of pushing human science beyond its known limits. "The Council thinks quantum physics works one way," he explained to the assembled team of scientists and military personnel. "But they've been stuck in the same theoretical framework for centuries. What we've discovered is that the quantum membrane can be manipulated not just to hide objects, but to create temporary gateways." Ambassador Reed, now Director Reed of Project Phoenix, stepped forward. "You're talking about faster-than-light travel without using the Council's established jump points." "Exactly," Garrett nodded. "They control all known jump points, which is how they enforce their quarantine. But we can create our own temporary corridors through space-time." General Wells studied the equations with a frown. "How stable would these corridors be?" "Stable enough for small vessels like the Ghost Walker. We're years away from moving anything larger," Garrett admitted. "But it's a start. Combined with our quantum membrane technology, we could begin establishing hidden outposts beyond Council detection." Reed's eyes gleamed with possibility. Hidden colonies, supply caches, intelligence networks, and eventually, Wells added, forward bases for military operations. Reed turned to a large strategic display showing the known galaxy. Small red dots indicated confirmed Council worlds and installations. Yellow markers showed locations that Ghost Walker missions had scouted and found suitable for human use. "We've been patient," Reed said. "For 5 years we've watched, learned, and prepared. The Council believes we're safely contained, struggling just to maintain our civilization. They have no idea we've already slipped their cage." He gestured to a young analyst. What have we learned about this Archimedes protocol that Captain Jackson's team discovered? The analyst stepped forward. It appears to be a contingency plan, sir. If certain species become too problematic, the Council can trigger gravitational disturbances in nearby stars. Not enough to cause a supernova, but sufficient to make a solar system uninhabitable. Shocked silence fell over the room. They would go that far? Someone whispered. They've never used it, the analyst continued. But the capability exists, and Earth was listed as a potential target if we showed signs of breaking the quarantine. Reed's jaw tightened. So they wouldn't just shoot down our ships. They'd sterilize our entire system. Which means, General Wells concluded, that when we finally move against them, it can't be a half measure. We would need to disable their ability to implement this protocol before they realize what's happening. Reed nodded slowly. Update the timeline. We've been planning for a 10-year buildup before any overt action, but this changes things. We need to accelerate development of our offensive capabilities. As the meeting adjourned, Reed remained staring at the galactic map. The Council had thousands of worlds. Humanity had one dying planet, a partially terraformed Mars, and a handful of small lunar and asteroid bases. The odds seemed impossible, but humanity had something the Council didn't understand. Desperation combined with ingenuity. On Earth, the public remained largely unaware of Project Phoenix's true scope. They knew only that amazing scientific breakthroughs were happening at an unprecedented rate. New fusion reactors solved the energy crisis. Advanced hydroponics and synthetic proteins addressed food shortages. Automated manufacturing reduced dependency on resources that could no longer be imported from off-world. What they didn't know was that each of these civilian technologies had a military application. Fusion reactors powered new weapons. Food production systems were being adapted for long-duration space missions. Automated factories secretly produced components for a growing fleet of stealth vessels. In a secure facility beneath the Pacific Ocean, President Morgan met with her successor, President Alvarez, for a private briefing. The situation is both better and worse than the public knows, Morgan explained, showing him classified reports. We're not just surviving. We're advancing faster than at any point in human history. Necessity has eliminated bureaucratic barriers to progress. But we've also confirmed that the Council would destroy us completely if they knew what we were building. President-elect Alvarez studied the reports with a grave expression.
How long can we keep this hidden?
The Ghostwalker program, the quantum physics breakthroughs, all of it. Not much longer, Morgan admitted. Each mission beyond the quarantine increases the risk of discovery. But we need more time. Director Reed estimates we need at least 3 more years before we could survive an open conflict. And the sleeper agents? The humans who were off-world when the banishment came? Morgan smiled thinly. They've been invaluable. Over 8,000 humans were stranded on various worlds. Many have gone underground, changing identities, altering their appearances. They've become our eyes and ears. Some have even managed to reach positions of influence. And they're loyal after all this time? The Council didn't just banish us. They made examples of many humans who couldn't hide quickly enough. Our people haven't forgotten. They've been waiting for the day we return. Alvarez nodded slowly. What's our next step? Operation Lighthouse, Morgan replied. We've identified 12 key Council facilities that are vulnerable to sabotage. Nothing dramatic, nothing that points to human involvement, just accidents, system failures, unexpected problems that will consume their resources and attention while we continue to build our strength. And if we're discovered before we're ready? Morgan's expression hardened. Then we execute Operation Hammerfall immediately. It's a high-risk, last-resort plan to strike at the Council's primary communication hubs. It would buy us time to implement a broader defensive strategy. As they concluded the briefing, Morgan handed Alvarez a small data crystal. This contains everything about Project Phoenix that doesn't exist in any computer system. Memorize it, then destroy it. The future of our species depends on what we do in the next few years. Captain Jackson stood on the bridge of the Defiance, the first true warship humanity had built since the banishment. At 400 meters long, it was tiny compared to Council dreadnoughts, but it incorporated every technological advantage humans had developed or stolen over the past 5 years. Quantum membrane stable, reported her first officer. Weapon systems green. FTL drive spooling up. Banished by the galaxy. Humanity declares war and builds a mighty empire. The Proxima Centauri trading hub glittered against the blackness of space, its artificial rings rotating slowly to generate gravity for the thousands of aliens who called it home. Council patrol ships drifted lazily along their regular routes, their crews complacent after years of routine duty. No alarms sounded, no sensors detected anything unusual. It was just another quiet cycle on the edge of Council space. Admiral Victor Torres stood on the bridge of the Retribution, the flagship of humanity's newly christened First Fleet. After 10 years of preparation following Earth's banishment, the moment had finally arrived. 30 warships waited in formation, hidden behind the quantum membrane that rendered them invisible to Council technology. "Status report," Torres ordered, his voice steady despite the historical weight of what they were about to do. "All ships report ready, Admiral," his executive officer replied. "Quantum membrane stable, weapon systems charged, strike teams on standby." Torres studied the holographic display showing the trading hub's defenses, 7 patrol ships, minimal, point defense systems, and a single outdated defensive platform. The Council had grown complacent after centuries without serious warfare. "Commence Operation Thunderbolt," Torres commanded. Phase 1. Throughout Council space, the carefully planted human sleeper agents received the coded signal they had been waiting for. On 24 different worlds, key facilities suddenly experienced critical systems failures. Communication relays went offline. Defense grids flickered and failed. Emergency protocols activated, drawing security forces away from their regular posts. As planned, the resulting chaos meant that no one noticed when the quantum field around the human fleet briefly fluctuated as they prepared to attack. Phase 2, Torres ordered. Deploy strike teams. From the belly of each human warship, small, assault craft detached and accelerated toward the trading hub. Each carried elite soldiers equipped with stolen and enhanced Council technology. Unlike the warships, these craft didn't remain hidden. They couldn't maintain the quantum membrane during high-speed maneuvers, but they were fast, incredibly fast. Council defense systems finally detected the incoming threat, but the response was sluggish, confused. By the time the first patrol ship managed to power up its weapons, 3 human assault craft had already docked with the trading hub. "They're scrambling to respond," reported the sensor officer. "Patrol ships are breaking formation to intercept our assault teams." Torres nodded. "Perfect, execute Phase 3. The quantum membrane surrounding the human fleet collapsed, revealing 30 warships where moments before there had been empty space. The Council patrol vessels froze in confusion, caught between defending the station and responding to this new impossible threat. Torres didn't give them time to choose. "All ships, open fire," he ordered. The Retribution's main cannon fired first, a brilliant blue beam that sliced through the nearest patrol ship as if it were made of paper. The rest of the fleet followed suit, targeting the remaining defenders with precision strikes that left no opportunity for distress calls. Inside the trading hub, controlled chaos unfolded as human strike teams secured key locations. Unlike the Council's expectations of primitive savages, the human soldiers moved with discipline and precision, neutralizing resistance without unnecessary casualties. "Admiral," the communications officer called out, "Strike Team Alpha has secured the central data core, beginning download of all navigational and technical databases. Strike Team Bravo reports the shipyard control center is secure. They're overriding safety protocols on the docked vessels." Torres allowed himself a thin smile. "And the quantum communication array?" "Strike Team Charlie has control. They're redirecting all outgoing distress signals to a null point. As far as the rest of the Council knows, everything here is normal." On the main view screen, Torres watched as Council ships attempting to flee were systematically disabled by his fleet. Not destroyed, that wasn't the objective, but left adrift, unable to warn others of what was happening. "Sir," his executive officer reported, "we've captured 3 Council officials, including the station governor. Bring them to the Retribution," Torres ordered. "I want to deliver our message personally." 2 hours later, the captured officials stood on the bridge of the human flagship, their compound eyes wide with fear and disbelief. The station governor, a tall, spindly being called Narvox, stared at the human admiral. Impossible, Narvox whispered. The quarantine was perfect. How did you escape your system? Torres didn't answer directly. Instead, he gestured to the view screen showing the now secured trading hub. 10 years ago, your council passed judgment on humanity. You believed you could contain us, isolate us, perhaps watch us wither and die. Today you learn how wrong you were. Around them, human crew members worked efficiently at their stations, using technology that the council had believed was centuries beyond human capability. What do you want? Narvox asked. Why attack here? This is a civilian outpost. This is a strategic hub with minimal defenses but maximum intelligence value, Torres corrected. As for what we want, he paused, making sure the alien understood the significance of his next words. We are taking back what's ours. The colony you seized at Proxima Centauri, the resources you've denied us, the freedom to exist among the stars. He stepped closer to the alien governor. I'm releasing you and your colleagues with a message for the council. Humanity is no longer contained. We are no longer your prisoners. We have claimed this system as the first territory of the Terran Imperium. Narvox's translator struggled to process the term. Imperium? You declare yourselves an empire? We declare ourselves free, Torres replied, and we're just getting started. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 3 days after the Proxima Centauri attack. High Arbiter Valixus, still in power after a decade, stared in disbelief at the reports flooding in from across Council space. How is this possible? He demanded, all 4 arms gesturing in agitation. The humans were quarantined. Their system was under constant surveillance. The military advisor, General Krex of the Valoran hegemony, displayed a holographic map showing affected systems. The attack on Proxima Centauri was just the beginning. We've confirmed human strikes against 6 monitoring stations, 2 research facilities, and a refueling depot. All executed with precision using technology we didn't believe they possessed. What technology? Demanded a council member. Some form of quantum field manipulation that renders their ships effectively invisible until they choose to reveal themselves, Krex explained. And they've somehow developed their own method of faster-than-light travel that doesn't rely on our jump points. Murmurs of alarm spread through the chamber. That's impossible, Valixus insisted. Such technology is beyond. Beyond primitives? Interrupted a voice from the chamber entrance. All eyes turned to see a human woman walking confidently into the council chamber, flanked by 2 armed council guards who seemed uncertain whether to stop her. Director Teresa Alvarez representing the Terran Imperium, she announced. Your security isn't as effective as you think. Valixus recovered quickly. Arrest her immediately. The guards hesitated, then lowered their weapons. I'm afraid they can't do that, Alvarez said calmly. Just as your ships at Proxima Centauri couldn't respond properly. We've been studying your neural implant technology for years. It has vulnerabilities. Horror spread across alien faces as the implication became clear. The standardized neural implants used throughout Council security forces had somehow been compromised. What do you want? Valixus asked, echoing Governor Narvox's question. I'm here to present terms, Alvarez replied. The Terran Imperium claims all systems within 20 light-years of Sol, including our original colony at Proxima Centauri. We demand reparations for the suffering caused by your illegal quarantine, and we require formal recognition of humanity as a sovereign power. Or what? Challenged a council member. Alvarez smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Or we continue what we started at Proxima Centauri. Your council has ruled through fear and technological superiority for too long. But you forgot something important about conflict. It breeds innovation. And humans are very, very good at innovation when threatened. She placed a small device on the chamber floor. It projected a hologram of the Proxima Centauri trading hub, now flying the flag of the Terran Imperium. We'll give you 48 hours to consider our terms. Unlike the Council, we prefer peaceful resolution when possible. As she turned to leave, Valixus called out, You cannot possibly hope to stand against the combined might of the Council. We have thousands of worlds, millions of ships. Alvarez paused. High Arbiter, you still don't understand what you created when you banished us. You didn't contain a threat. You removed all the constraints that held it in check. Back on the Retribution, now stationed proudly in orbit around humanity's reclaimed colony world, Admiral Torres received the encrypted transmission from Director Alvarez. The message has been delivered, she reported. How are our preparations proceeding? On schedule, Torres confirmed. The Proxima shipyards are already being converted to our specifications. We'll have doubled our fleet capacity within 6 months. And the colonists? Banished by the galaxy, humanity declares war and builds a mighty empire. General Diana Wells stood on the observation deck of the massive space station Defiance, watching as a delegation of alien representatives docked in the primary bay. 20 years had passed since humanity's banishment from galactic society. What had begun as a desperate bid for survival had evolved into something no one could have predicted. The rise of a new power in the galaxy. General, they've cleared security, her aide reported. The Zilarians seem nervous. The Pelkin delegation is showing signs of aggression. Wells nodded. That's to be expected. 10 years ago they were voting to maintain our quarantine. Now they're here to negotiate protection agreements. The Terran Imperium had grown rapidly in the decades since Admiral Torres reclaimed Proxima Centauri. What started as a small foothold had expanded to control of 30 star systems. Some had been taken through calculated military action. Others had simply been claimed when their former council administrators fled, rather than face human forces. Most surprising to the council, however, was that several systems had willingly joined the human empire. The Arcturian Collective, the Tau Oligarchy, and most recently, the Zilarian Republic, all had formally requested alliance with humanity. The council representatives have also arrived. Her aide continued. They're requesting separate accommodations from the defector delegations. Wells smiled thinly. Denied. If they want to negotiate with us, they can sit at the same table as everyone else. The days of council supremacy are over. She straightened her uniform and headed toward the diplomatic chamber. As the highest-ranking military officer in the Imperium, her presence at these negotiations was more symbolic than practical, but symbolism mattered. The aliens needed to understand that humanity's diplomatic and military arms worked in perfect coordination. The chamber fell silent as Wells entered. 12 alien delegations representing species from across the galaxy watched her with a mixture of fear, respect, and curiosity. At the far end of the table sat 3 council representatives, their posture rigid with barely contained hostility. Welcome to Defiance Station, Wells began, her voice carrying easily through the chamber. 20 years ago, your council banished humanity from galactic society. They sealed our solar system, cut off our colonies, and left us to die a slow death of resource starvation. She walked slowly around the table, making eye contact with each delegation. Instead, we thrived, we advanced. And now we offer something the Council never truly provided: genuine security and fair partnership. The lead Council representative, a blue-skinned being named Javix, leaned forward. You offer protection with one hand while threatening conquest with the other. Your fleets have seized Council territories without provocation. Without provocation? Wells raised an eyebrow. Was the illegal quarantine of our homeworld not provocation? Was the abandonment of our colonists not provocation? The Terran Imperium has only taken systems necessary to ensure our security and reclaim what was rightfully ours. A representative from the Zilarian Republic spoke next. The Council abandoned my people when the Krell raiders targeted our outer colonies. For centuries, we paid tribute for protection that never came. The humans deployed a defense fleet within days of our request. Murmurs of agreement came from several other delegations. The Council's model is obsolete, Wells continued. They demand compliance but offer little in return. The Terran Imperium seeks partners, not subjects. And yet you call yourselves an empire, Javix countered. Names have power, Wells acknowledged. After what your council did to us, we needed a name that would be remembered, respected, and perhaps even feared. But our actions speak louder than our title. She activated a holographic display showing the systems under human protection. Crime rates reduced by 60%. Economic growth increased by 40%. Technological advancement accelerated across all sectors. These are not the hallmarks of oppression. The council representatives shifted uncomfortably. They couldn't deny the data. Systems that had joined the humans were objectively better off than they had been under council oversight. "What exactly do you want from this meeting?" asked a representative from the Pelkan hierarchy, a militaristic species known for their directness. Wells smiled. "Simple. Formal recognition of the Terran Imperium as a sovereign power, acknowledgement of our territorial claims, and non-interference in our future expansion." "Expansion?" Javik's voice rose. "You already control 30 systems." 30 systems compared to the Council's thousands," Wells replied calmly. "We have no designs on Council core worlds. But the outer territories, the ones you've neglected for centuries, those are open for discussion." The chamber erupted in multilingual chatter as delegations processed this bold statement. Wells let the commotion continue for a moment before raising her hand for silence. "Consider your options carefully," she advised. The Council's policy of isolation failed. Their attempt at military response failed even more spectacularly. The Battle of Arcturus demonstrated that conclusively. At the mention of Arcturus, several delegates flinched. 3 years earlier, the Council had assembled its largest battle fleet in centuries to crush the human rebellion once and for all. The resulting engagement had been a disaster for Council forces, with 67 ships destroyed and another 42 captured. Human casualties had been minimal, thanks to their superior technology and tactics. "We prefer cooperation," Wells continued, "but we are prepared for the alternative if necessary." As the diplomatic session continued, Director Reed observed from a private chamber adjacent to the main room. At 73, he was no longer the vibrant diplomat who had once stood alone before the Council. His hair had turned white, his face lined with the stress of guiding humanity's transformation from banished species to galactic power. "They're afraid," noted Dr. Marcus Garrett, who stood beside him. The physicist had aged as well, though the intensity in his eyes remained unchanged. "Not just the Council, all of them." Reed nodded. "Fear can be useful if channeled properly. General Wells understands that balance." "The Arcturus technology worked even better than we anticipated," Garrett said, changing the subject. "The quantum field manipulation exceeded our projections by 30%. "And the application you mentioned earlier? The one that goes beyond military use?" Garrett's expression brightened. "We've confirmed it. The same principles that allow our ships to travel independently of jump points could potentially be applied to terraform worlds previously considered uninhabitable. We could convert gas giants to human-compatible environments, establish colonies and systems the Council deemed worthless." Reed considered this. "So we wouldn't need to take Council worlds at all. We could build our own." "Precisely. With enough time and resources, we could create habitable worlds anywhere we choose." Reed's gaze returned to the negotiations. The Council representatives were now reviewing a formal treaty document, their body language suggesting reluctant acceptance of the inevitable. 20 years, Reed mused. "When they banished us, I promised them they'd regret making an enemy of humanity. I never imagined how completely that promise would be fulfilled." "You expected resistance?" Garrett asked. "I expected us to fight for survival," Reed clarified. "I never expected us to thrive as we have. The quarantine forced us to solve problems we might have otherwise ignored for generations. It united humanity in a way nothing else could have." "The Council did us a favor," Garrett suggested with irony. "In a way, yes, though I doubt the billions who suffered through the resource shortages in those first few years would agree." Reed's expression darkened at the memory. "We lost good people before Project Phoenix began bearing fruit." A chime sounded, indicating the diplomatic session was concluding. On the monitor, they could see General Wells accepting formal documents from each delegation. The negotiations had apparently reached their conclusion. "It seems we have our answer," Reed observed. Later that evening, in the command center of Defiance Station, General Wells briefed the Imperium's leadership on the outcome of the negotiations. 7 systems have formally requested admission to the Imperium, she reported, including 2 current Council members who wish to defect. President Martin, the 5th leader to govern humanity since the banishment, nodded with satisfaction. "And the Council itself?" "They've accepted reality, if not happily," Wells replied. "They've recognized our sovereignty over current territories and agreed to non-interference in negotiated expansions. In exchange, we've promised not to encourage further defections from their core worlds." A promise we can technically keep while still welcoming those who come to us, noted Admiral Torres, now fleet commander of the Imperium's combined naval forces. Exactly, Wells agreed. They're buying time, hoping to adapt to our technology and eventually challenge us again. But Dr. Garrett's team ensures we'll remain several steps ahead. President Martin turned to Reed, who had been quietly observing. Director, you've guided Project Phoenix from its inception. Is this outcome satisfactory? Reed considered the question carefully. It exceeds our original objectives. We sought survival, then security, then recognition. We've achieved all three and more. The question now is what kind of power we wish to become. Meaning? Torres asked. Ours banished by the galaxy, humanity declares war and builds a mighty empire. The crystalline dome of the Galactic Council chamber glowed with subdued blue light, casting long shadows across the tiered seats that had once held representatives from hundreds of worlds. Now many of those seats stood empty. The once mighty council, which had ruled unchallenged for millennia, had fractured into competing factions. 30 years had passed since they had banished humanity from galactic society, a decision that had set in motion events none could have foreseen. Thomas Reed, now 83 years old, walked slowly toward the central platform where he had once stood as a defendant. His steps were measured, his back still straight despite his advanced age. The gravity of the moment was not lost on him. He was returning to the place where humanity's journey from quarantined species to galactic power had begun. Ambassador Reed greeted High Arbiter Velixis, one of the few council officials who had survived the tumultuous decades of human ascension. Age had dulled the iridescence of his scales, but his four eyes still burned with the same intensity. Or should I address you as Director Reed of the Terran Imperium? Thomas will suffice, Reed replied calmly. Titles seem rather pointless given the circumstances. Around them, representatives from the remaining council races watched with a mixture of resentment and resignation. The chamber that had once hummed with the confidence of unquestioned authority now carried the heavy silence of defeat. You've come to formalize our surrender, I presume? Velixis asked, his translator failing to hide the bitterness in his voice. Reed shook his head. I've come to propose a new beginning. Humanity has no interest in your surrender or your destruction. We've achieved what we set out to do, secure our place among the stars and ensure we can never again be threatened with extinction. He activated a small device, projecting a holographic map of the galaxy. Colored sections highlighted the current political landscape. The red of the Terran Imperium now encompassed over 200 systems. The blue of the fractured council covered roughly 700, and various other colors represented independent worlds and smaller alliances. 30 years ago, you judged humanity too dangerous to exist freely in the galaxy, Reed continued. You feared what we might become if left unchecked. In some ways, your fears were justified. We advanced more quickly than any species in recorded history, developed technologies you believed impossible, and built an empire from nothing. Velixis's upper limbs twitched in what Reed had learned was a gesture of grudging acknowledgement. But your fundamental mistake, Reed said, wasn't in fearing our potential. It was in believing that containment was the solution. By trying to cage humanity, you removed all the constraints of cooperation and coexistence that would have naturally tempered our expansion. Murmurs spread through the chamber as translation devices conveyed Reed's words to various species. Why are you here? Velixis asked directly. Your fleets control the approaches to this system. The Imperium's technology surpasses our own. You could simply dictate terms. Reed smiled gently. Because that's the difference between us, Arbiter. The Council ruled through decree and isolation. Humanity built its strength through adaptation and cooperation. We have no desire to repeat your mistakes. He expanded the holographic display, highlighting a new political boundary that encompassed both human and council territories. I propose the formation of a galactic concordat, not an empire or a council, but a true federation of equals. Each species retains autonomy over its homeworlds and established colonies. Shared technologies, open borders, and mutual defense. Stunned silence greeted this proposal. A representative from the Morrigan Collective, one of the oldest council races, rose from her seat. You would share the quantum field technology? The wormhole generators? The terraforming systems? After all we did to you? Precisely because of what you did to us, Reed replied. Humanity learned the hard way what happens when advanced technology is hoarded and used as a means of control. We broke that system, We have no intention of replacing it with another version of the same. Felixus studied Reed with all four eyes. And if we refuse? Then the Terran Imperium will continue to exist alongside whatever remains of the Council. Systems will continue to defect to our protection as they have been doing for years. Eventually, the outcome will be the same, but the transition will be longer and more painful for everyone. Reed walked the perimeter of the central platform, addressing the entire chamber. Consider this. In 30 years, humans went from being confined to a single solar system to establishing an interstellar empire that rivaled the ancient council. Imagine what we could accomplish together instead of in opposition. Hours later, as the formal negotiations continued in the chamber, Reed withdrew to a small antechamber to rest. His age was catching up with him, the excitement of the day taxing his strength. He was surprised when the door slid open to admit Felixus. "The council representatives are discussing your proposal," the High Arbiter said. "I thought we might speak privately." Reed gestured to a seat suitable for the alien's physiology. "Of course. I've served as High Arbiter for over 70 years, Felixus began. I've witnessed the rise and fall of many species, many civilizations. None have accomplished what humans have in such a short time. Necessity is a powerful motivator," Reed observed. "More than that, there is something different about your kind." Felixus's voice carried genuine curiosity. "When we quarantined your system, our models predicted you would deplete your resources within 5 years, descend into civil war within 7, and reach pre-industrial levels within 20. Reed chuckled. "Your models failed to account for human adaptability." "Indeed." Felixus leaned forward. "Tell me honestly, was there ever a point where you considered simple revenge? Complete destruction of the Council?" Reed was silent for a moment, considering the question. There were those who advocated for it, especially in the early days when the resource shortages were at their worst. But vengeance is short-sighted. We wanted more than retribution. We wanted to ensure humanity would never again be at anyone's mercy. "You've succeeded beyond all possibility," Felixus acknowledged, "and now you offer partnership rather than dominance." "Because dominance is unstable," Reed explained. "The Council maintained control for thousands of years through technological superiority and isolation of potential threats. Once that superiority was challenged, the entire system began to collapse." Felixus made a gesture that Reed recognized as reluctant agreement. "The younger Council races will accept your concordat immediately. They have the most to gain. The elder races, we have much pride to swallow. Pride is a luxury none of us can afford anymore," Reed replied. "The galaxy is too vast. The challenge is too great for any single species or alliance to manage alone." A chime sounded, indicating the negotiations were ready to resume. As they rose to return to the chamber, Felixus asked one final question. "If you could return to this chamber 30 years ago, knowing what would happen, what would you do differently?" Reed smiled. "Nothing. The Council's mistake gave humanity its greatest opportunity. Sometimes, Arbiter, the worst thing you can do to humans is exactly what we need." The formal signing of the Galactic Concordat took place 3 days later in the same chamber where humanity had once been judged unworthy of galactic society. Representatives from 117 species, including both former Council races and Imperium allies, affixed their signatures or biological equivalents to the historic document. Reed, as the chief architect of humanity's rise and now the Concordat, stood at the center of the platform that had once been the site of his greatest defeat. Beside him stood President Olivia Chen, the 7th leader of the Terran Imperium and the first born after the banishment. "Today marks not the end of one era, but the beginning of another," Chen announced to the assembled delegates and the trillions watching via quantum transmission throughout the galaxy. 30 years ago, humanity stood alone, condemned to isolation by fear and misunderstanding. Today we stand together with former adversaries and new allies alike, united by a common vision of a galaxy where cooperation replaces domination, and where diversity of thought and biology is celebrated rather than feared. She gestured to the document now displayed holographically above the chamber. "The Concordat establishes not just peace but true partnership. Open exchange of technology, unified defense against external threats, free movement between signatory worlds, and a commitment to solving the great challenges that face us all." from the dying stars in the Cygnus arm to the mysterious spatial anomalies in the galactic core. As the ceremony concluded, Reed found himself approached by Admiral Torres and General Wells, both now in their 60s but still serving in advisory roles to the Imperium's military. "It's done," Torres said quietly. "When I led the fleet against Proxima Centauri 20 years ago, I never imagined it would end like this." "Not an ending," Reed corrected gently. "A new chapter." General Wells surveyed the chamber, watching as former enemies cautiously engaged in conversation. "Will it last, do you think? The Council ruled for thousands of years through force. We're attempting to govern through consensus,